I would like to welcome everybody from around the world. I'm Janine Birtwistle and I'm a member of the polio team here in Great Britain and Ireland, and I'll be moderating this evening. And joining me is our speaker, Dr Zubair Wadood, who I'll introduce in a moment, and Keith Paver, who is one of our polio coordinators he's the polio coordinator for Region 20. So without further ado, I would like to now introduce our speaker, Dr Zubair Wadood. Some of you will have heard him last year when he did a polio seminar for us. Zubair is a senior epidemiologist at the WHO. He is very, very familiar with the polio program. He's a doctor from Pakistan originally. He's worked in many areas where there are crises. He's one of the ones that helps to deal with outbreaks of vaccine-derived polio, which he'll be talking to you about. And at the moment, his role also includes leading the operations globally for the polio teams, the COVID teams, and routine immunizations. So he is an exceptionally busy man, and we are truly privileged to have Zubair joining us this evening and for the time that he's taken talking about the preparation for this evening. So what would you like to tell us, please, about vaccine-derived polio?
A very, very good evening, good afternoon, good morning, Rotarians from Great Britain, Ireland, and from beyond across the world. I'm really privileged to be all of you again on this forum to talk and interact on a very, very important topic. And it's always refreshing and energizing being with the Rotarians, you know. And thanks very much, Janine, and all on the call for having me on this forum for this evening. So I'll be talking about circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses, but before zooming into that, I'll touch upon some other basic things just for refreshing our minds and reminding ourselves of certain facts. So as I said, friends, before we zoom into today's focus topic, I just wanted to remind ourselves that we are currently the closest ever to our goal with just 2 polio endemic countries, that is Pakistan and Afghanistan, and recalling that this compares to those hundreds of countries, more than 125 countries with more than 350,000 cases when we kicked off the Polio Plus more than 3 decades ago. So this is a tremendous progress that the program has made, and as I said, we are very close now to the finish line. Okay, so this slide is a bit complex, but I'll just try to make it as simple as possible. You can now see on this slide that the red dots are only confined to 2 endemic countries, as I mentioned earlier, and then the green dots, which signify circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses, they have sort of overnumbered now wild poliovirus cases which are denoted by red dots. And regarding the wild poliovirus type 1, as of last week, it's very good to tell you guys that only 2 wild poliovirus cases were reported, 1 each from Pakistan and Afghanistan in 2021, with the last wild polio case had onset of paralysis on 27th of January this year. So this compares to almost 39 polio cases, wild polio cases that is, reported last year until this time. So this is quite encouraging. During the course of entire 2020, Pakistan, Afghanistan reported 140 wild polio cases, and this seemingly, you know, is indicating some progress. You know, the lower number of cases this year. In 2020, when we come to circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses, so in 2020. 24 countries were affected by the outbreaks of this virus, with more than 1,000 cases, 1,046 to be specific. And in 2021, until last week, we had 6 countries which are affected by the outbreaks of circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses so far, with 48 paralytic polio cases. Now, before we move on, it'll be good just to refresh our memories about the several types of polioviruses. So when the program kicked off back in 1985, we were mainly aware of three types of wild polioviruses, that is type 1, type 2, and type 3, as you can see in the upper box. Since that time, we have been able to achieve, worldwide eradication of type 2 wild poliovirus that had last case in 1999, and then also type 3 wild poliovirus, which had last case in 2012. And as we progressed, the program discovered that there can be vaccine-derived polioviruses from the use of oral polio vaccine, which are necessarily mutated Sabin poliovirus or vaccine polioviruses of all the three strains. So the way these vaccine-derived polioviruses behave in terms of epidemiology, human-to-human transmission, neurovirulence, or pathophysiology, the way it behaves inside the human body, and the way it can be controlled, these are quite similar to wild polioviruses. And I'll go in further depth on this in the subsequent section. Okay, so again, to refresh our knowledge that, there are two basic type of polio vaccines available to prevent this disease. Both these are actually excellent vaccines. However, these vaccines are different the way they are administered and the way they can induce immunity in an individual. So inactivated polio vaccine, first developed by Jonas Salk, as we know, in 1955, it comprises of killed or what we call inactivated poliovirus and is administered through injectable route. While the oral polio vaccine, first developed in 1961 by Albert Sabin, is composed of live attenuated or live weakened polioviruses, and it's administered through the oral route, as we all know. Now, so on this slide, on the left-hand side of, you can see that it demonstrates the way oral polio vaccine induces immunity, and the same is mentioned on the right-hand side for both oral polio vaccine and inactivated polio vaccine. So I'll start from the right-hand side. Both oral polio vaccine and inactivated vaccine induce humoral immunity, which means production of antibodies in the blood. This mechanism provides protection to an individual against polio paralysis. Since IPV is administered through injectable route, as I mentioned earlier, it is an excellent vaccine towards preventing individual paralytic disease. On the left-hand side, you may note the edge or advantage that oral polio vaccine has over the inactivated polio vaccine. In addition to humoral immunity or individual immunity, the oral polio vaccine is, it also provides immunity at the oropharynx and intestinal levels. This means the individuals who receive oral polio vaccine are immune against poliovirus in a way that they do not transmit these viruses to other human beings. So IPV or inactivated polio vaccine, it does not effectively provide this kind of immunity, which means that the main the modes of transmission of wild polioviruses and vaccine-derived polioviruses are blocked or prevented only by the use of oral polio vaccine, and that's why it is the vaccine of choice for reaching eradication. It's great to remind ourselves that, in the last decade, with the help of our worthy Rotarians, 10 billion doses of OPV have been delivered to almost 3 billion children across the globe, and almost 20 million individuals and children who would have been otherwise paralyzed or on their feet today. That said, the vaccine does have, some very, very rare consequences in the form of what we call vaccine-associated paralytic polio, which is a one-time paralytic polio that does not transmit from individual to individual, and its incidence is very, very rare. And then what we are going to focus tonight is vaccine-derived polioviruses. It's a very rare strain of poliovirus, which is genetically different from the original strain, and it emerges in the areas with low vaccination coverage, and VDPV strain may revert to a form that can lead to paralytic disease again. and causing outbreaks of circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses, and we'll dig a bit more deep into this. Now, what is vaccine-derived poliovirus? It's a mutated vaccine virus, and as I said, it occurs when OPV, which is originally an attenuated virus, it regains its ability to cause polio, paralytic polio. It is very important to understand that this does not emerge, vaccine-derived poliovirus does not emerge from the vaccine virus in well-vaccinated and highly immune populations. It emerges only, when large proportions of people in a community or in a given geographical area, they are under-immunized and give way for the emergence of vaccine-derived poliovirus, and then onwards, for its circulation. So the way I describe it, that the recipe for the emergence of vaccine-derived poliovirus has two key ingredients. One is OPV, which is given for in the goodwill for good purpose to protect individuals. But then if it is given to very, very few individuals and the immunization coverage is very, very low, that forms the second ingredient, a very low immune population, which in this kind of setting, the vaccine-derived poliovirus can emerge from the vaccine virus. And then we initially came to know about this virus in the year 2000, when an outbreak in Hispaniola and the Caribbean, it was almost 4 decades after the first licensure of OPV. Okay, as I said that, vaccine-derived poliovirus is associated with person-to-person transmission and is circulating in the environment. And as I said, when routine immunization and supplementary immunization activities are implemented in a way that they do not reach all the children in a given area, rather, I would say in a setting where the coverage is very, very low, and a significant chunk of the population is left susceptible to poliovirus. And then once we come to a situation where we are facing an outbreak of vaccine-derived poliovirus, our experience has taught us that such an outbreak can be stopped with two to three high quality rounds with an appropriate vaccine, and that can be delivered, in most of the instances through large-scale supplementary immunization activities. What's our perspective now? As I mentioned, OPV is the critical and ideal vaccine for stopping transmission and achieving eradication goal. It will be gradually and appropriately taken out or withdrawal from immunization systems, and this has been initiated with the withdrawal of type 2 vaccine virus now, with what we call the switch from TOPV to BOPV. And this switch that I just mentioned, from TOPV to BOPV, it has certain, it was executed after certain important developments along our journey to polio eradication. As I mentioned earlier, wild poliovirus type 2 was declared eradicated in 2015, marking very important milestones. Also, the risk of vaccine-associated paralytic polio that I alluded to earlier, and vaccine-derived poliovirus's emergence is the highest with type 2 vaccine virus. After the withdrawal of type 2 vaccine component in April 2016, bivalent OPV that contains the remaining two types, the type 1 and type 3 vaccine viruses, it's now being used in the immunization systems along with IPV in routine immunization and also for supplementary immunization activities. However, stocks of monovalent oral polio vaccine type 2, they are being maintained and are available to respond to CVDPV2 outbreaks. It's very critical to respond to these outbreaks, and we have to have an appropriate vaccine. For the moment, it's MOPV2, and I'll talk about a new vaccine in a moment. But what I want to tell here and on the subsequent slide is when we were executing the switch, the modeling groups, the modelers who predict the disease patterns for futures, they had predicted that all VDPV2 outbreaks will possibly be stopped by the end of 2020. But what happened exactly? Well, what happened is very different than what was predicted. as you can see, the number of outbreaks continue to increase as we moved away further and further from the switch time. And that is because of, few reasons, but two reasons are the key reasons. One is that all those children who were born after the switch did not receive any type 2 antigen. And even there were areas that, even before the switch was done, the type 2 vaccine coverage was very, very low. And that little vaccine that was existing in the environment, it continued to transmit. And the new vaccine that was given, the MOPV2 type 2 antigen that was given in response to the type 2 CVDPV2 outbreaks, that also led to prolonging outbreaks, and we are seeing explosive outbreaks in multiple geographies across the world. And on the next slide, you will see that's how the numbers progressed. So in 2016, we merely had 2 cases of vaccine-derived polio. And as I said, last year, in 2020, we had more than 1,000 cases, and it's clearly overnumbered the number of wild poliovirus cases. Okay, now, the global polio program, it did respond quite efficiently to the outbreaks, during the course of last 5 years. I'll mention more about 2020, as you can see that 33 individual CVDPV2 outbreaks in several parts of the world, the African region, the Middle Eastern part, and the Asian continent. The program was able to respond, and then I would say 30 out of these 33 outbreaks, I would say 90%, maybe a little more than that, were due to the use of MOPV2 in the period after the switch. So all those outbreaks that were caused by the type 2 vaccine virus that was circulating from the time before April 2016, those outbreaks were overcome and stopped. However, the new type 2 virus that was actually instilled in response to the type CVDPV2 outbreaks, that led to new outbreaks because all these campaigns could not achieve very high coverage. And we have learned over time, during the last 5 years, that if good quality campaigns are implemented, 2 such rounds with MOPV2 campaigns should be able to stop these outbreaks. But as I said, there is always a risk of seeding and emergence of new VDPVs and CVDPVs over the course of period, which actually strongly calls for the development of a new mucosal polio vaccine, which is better stable and does not lead to further emergencies. Now, broadly, 3 issues that we have come across: low routine immunization, for which routine immunization strengthening is required, which we know is not a short-term solution. It can take quite some time, and our race is against the time. And this is especially true for the areas where we don't have very strong immunization systems and health systems. Then the program quality in terms of delivering vaccine to 90% or 95% of the kids when outbreak response is implemented, it's not uniform, across all the places where we have seen CVDPVs. And the solution for that is to continue the efforts to improve the quality. But then the third and another, very important fact is that our current tool, as I said, monovalent OPV2 vaccine, is responsible for seeding new outbreaks. And that's where, the program has been making efforts to develop new vaccine to be used in the coming months to years. And GPI strategy for the control of CVDPV2 that was reviewed and revised in early 2020, one of the key components is fast tracking the development of the new vaccine, what we call novel OPV2, as an alternative and a better choice instead of monovalent OPV2. And of course, the other 3 components of the strategy, as you can see, also try and mention addressing weaknesses in the routine immunization, optimizing outbreak response, and achieving high quality, and also maintaining adequate supplies for outbreak response. Okay, so how is NOPV2 different than the currently used monovalent OPV2? It is actually a modification of the MOPV2 that we are currently using, and the immunity that it induces, it is almost exactly the same as provided by monovalent OPV2. But how is it different is, it's an extremely important point that it is genetically far more stable compared to the monovalent OPV2. And what does that mean? It means that the likelihood of its reversion to a strain that can lead to paralytic polio is very low compared to the monovalent vaccine. And that's why we are really hopeful that using this vaccine would not only help curbing down and stopping the outbreaks that are currently existing, but also due to its genetic stability would not lead to any further outbreaks that has been the case over the last 5 years. Okay, so now how will this vaccine be made available? It's mainly through a mechanism called WHO's Emergency Use Listing, or EUL, and it's a special regulatory pathway to be utilized for public health emergencies of international concern that polio is, and it facilitates and ensures the availability of medical products at a rapid pace to be utilized in emergency or serious public health situations. It is a very meticulous process, by the way, that involves months of very careful and rigorous examination and analysis by WHO pre-qualification team, as well as a group of independent experts. And the good news is that EUL for novel OPV2 was granted on the 13th of November 2020, and a number of yourselves would be already aware. And this EUL approval has enabled initial use of this vaccine. And I'm very happy to mention that Nigeria and Liberia have managed to implement novel OPV2 SIAs very recently, vaccinating close to 9 million children so far. Nigeria has finished one significant scale round and is in process of doing their second round. And also very happy to tell that several other countries are making a lot of efforts to complete readiness for the use of novel OPV2. Okay, now 2020, this is just a snapshot, of 2020 from the polio eradication lens. We had significant successes as well as quite a few challenges and setbacks. As I said, we have to remember 2 of the 3 poliovirus serotypes certified eradicated now. The only one left is type 1. All WHO regions, except one, that is the Eastern Mediterranean region, are now certified wild poliovirus free. The African region, the most recent one, certified in 2020. As I said, good looking trend towards the end of 2020 and early 2021 for wild poliovirus type 1 epidemiology. We have EUL for NOPV2, and that we should be very proud of thousands of polio workers, laboratory and surveillance and community networks that supported the pandemic response. But on the other hand, we had the setback in the form of COVID-19 disrupting the vaccination campaigns for a very significant period of time, 3 to 5 months in a number of places, in critical places. It also had a effect on the sensitivity of the surveillance, pending CVD-BV2 outbreaks, going beyond type 1 wild poliovirus and with geographical expansion. All right, so priorities for the next 6 months. I'm moving towards the conclusion. An important priority is to fast track progress in Pakistan, Afghanistan. On CVD-BV2 outbreaks, the program is planning to further follow up on initial use of novel OPV, meeting the requirements during this initial use period, and then start with a wider use once the safety and efficacy has been fully established. It will be important also to build on resumption of SIAs after the COVID-19-led disruptions, as I mentioned, and maintain program activities despite the ongoing pandemic. The global eradication strategy review, it's in its final phases, and the program plans to finalize and kick off early part of the second half of 2021, and then The program will further work as part of the revised strategy, actually, on mutually benefiting coordination and integration of supplementary immunization activities and routine immunization. All right, so just a few key messages to again, this just to summarize a few key messages is, VDPVs are something that we did not know much about when we initiated Polio Plus in 1985. Our current knowledge on VDPV2 is quite comprehensive now, I must say. As eradicators, we must ensure getting rid of both wild poliovirus and vaccine-derived poliovirus to gift a polio-free world to our generations to come. The program has learned that VDPVs are manageable, and we now have a new, more effective tool to stop the CVDPV2 outbreaks without risk of seeding. And the last thing I want to again mention is removal or withdrawal of OPV is an important component of the end phase of polio eradication and Polio Plus initiative, I would say, and it is critical to execute it appropriately to prevent VDPVs in future and to have a globe completely free of polio. And here I would like to really again salute and pass my sincere appreciations for the ongoing tremendous help offered by the Rotarians across the world. And I would just like you to be very proud of the contributions you have made so far. And these pictures are not just pictures, these are telling stories. We were able to stop CVDPV2 outbreaks in settings like Syria, and those 74 cases in Syria were in almost a war zone, where the program was able to operate and offer vaccine. And this reminds me of my personal presence in Amman for about 1 year, where I was coordinating Syria polio outbreak response. Tremendous effort, and this was all possible by absolutely remarkable help from the Rotarians. And also, on one hand, we know that we have expanding outbreaks and intensifying CVDPV2 transmission, but we should also be, telling ourselves that a number of African countries also got rid of these outbreaks. Although we want to reach zero, which is really an unforgiving kind of target, but really the help from Rotarians, support from Rotarians in several different ways has enabled this initiative to prevent paralysis for children in a number of places, including places hit by the humanitarian emergencies. I will not end before I also pay my tribute, and I'm sure all of us can do that together, and you will be with me on that, to the frontline workers who are the real heroes, who are trying to reach and making all the effort, whether it's deserts, whether it's, rivers and canals, or is it even if those are flooding situations or areas which are, having very heavy snow in the winters, these heroes and these frontline workers, nothing is insurmountable in front of them. And I would also like to refer to the recent tragedy that we had in Afghanistan, where a few lady frontline workers, polio vaccination workers, volunteers, they lost their lives in very unfortunate incidents. I was in Afghanistan until last year and had the chance to personally see these workers, the way they put themselves forward and the passion they have to serve their communities and their children for the cause of polio eradication is just remarkable. And we have to just salute them and express our solidarity with them. That's the end of my talk here. But again, I would say Rotary Polio Plus initiated in 1985. Who knew that we'll reach a moment where we would only have 2 endemic countries with wild poliovirus to address. It has taken us long, but now we are at a point where the finish line is in sight. We are very, very close. And this is all possible. This has all been possible due to the wonderful ongoing consistent support and wonderful help by the worthy Rotarians across the world. I really thank you and salute you, and would end my presentation here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Zubair. I'm sure that everybody will share their thanks to you through the Zoom way of doing so. So the silent thanks very much for that. So much covered in such a short time. This session is recorded, as I mentioned earlier, and it will become available shortly in the next few days, or certainly by next week, on the Rotary Great Britain and Ireland YouTube channel. And I will also be sending all those that registered copy of the presentation, a PDF copy of Zubair's presentation. So I do have a lot of questions that we've already received. If we get through those questions that we had in advance, then we'll also turn to Keith and the questions that he will have had, I'm sure, through the chat facility. At one point I'd like to make, because a number of the questions relate specifically to Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I'll be giving you details at the end, but our next session will actually be focused on Afghanistan and Pakistan, specifically with Dr Hamid Jafari, who is the WHO Director of Polio Eradication for the Eastern Mediterranean region, of which Afghanistan and Pakistan form a part. So Zubair has an excellent knowledge of that area, but a lot of the questions I will put to Zubair, but will I also consider with Dr Hamid on the 17th of May. So Zubair, I'd like to kick off, please, with some fairly straightforward questions, I think. First question is from Dennis Spiller. Has the pandemic travel restrictions helped limit the spread of polio?
That's a very, very interesting and good question. So I would say yes and no. When we look at the patterns of poliovirus transmission across Pakistan and Afghanistan, that's one epidemiological block with shared transmission historically. So over the last 1 year, during the course of pandemic, that shared transmission patterns have continued, but it looks like they have sort of slowed down. The transmission itself has slowed down, and also the shared transmission pattern has also slowed down across that globe. But then such movement restriction would not lead to stopping transmission unless we perform very good quality vaccination. But on the other hand, in the African region, we can see that, due to the disruption of COVID-19 cost for the vaccination, it has led to explosive increase in intensity and geographic spread. So in the African region, we haven't seen a real, I would say, slimming down or curbing down transmission due to COVID-led movements. So in nutshell, not really significant, and the only tool we have to finish polio is polio vaccine by reaching all those kids.
Thank you, Zubair. There's a couple of questions that I think you've really answered, but just to touch them, one is from Mike Marsh and the other from Maria, and I apologize for pronunciations, Muchova. Are the effects of vaccine-derived polio different from wild polio, and is it as virulent as the wild polio?
Well, as I said, once the vaccine-derived poliovirus, vaccine-derived poliovirus, it is termed as vaccine-derived poliovirus, once it regains its virulence to cause paralytic polio. So once there is outbreak of vaccine-derived poliovirus or circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus, it acts more or less the same way in terms of transmissibility, in terms of virulence, in terms of pathophysiology. And if the population immunity in that given area or in a given community is not very good, then it will lead to polio cases almost at the same rate as wild poliovirus.
Thank you, Zubair. Patrice Gadroy has asked about the murders of the 3 health workers in Afghanistan, and I think you have acknowledged that, and we all send our thoughts and our prayers in whatever way that we each do to their families. And I think it's absolutely incredible that often the families of workers who are killed or severely injured in campaigns actually are determined to continue the campaign. And we as Rotarians, I hope, will step up and realise that they're the true heroes and we need to be stepping up and supporting them. And I know that Dr Hamid will also refer to them in the talk in May. Zubair, Roderick Davis is asking, how can we persuade the naysayers that it is possible to overcome the anti-vaccine sections of society in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I guess that's globally as well. But again, your thoughts, please, but we may also consider that for Dr. Hamid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are parts of Afghanistan. So the first thing I would like to highlight here is that it's, you know, the challenge of communities or challenge of people refusing to polio vaccine. It's not uniformly spread across Pakistan and Afghanistan, but there are certain areas. For example, in the southern part of Afghanistan, there are a couple of provinces. In the southeastern part of Afghanistan, again, there are a few districts. And same is true for some parts of Pakistan. And these naysayers or refusals, they become significant once they exist in clusters. So if there are sporadic refusals here and there in areas where rest of the population is well vaccinated, they are important, but they become more important and epidemiologically very significant when they exist in clusters, right? So these clusters, they do exist in parts of Afghanistan and some parts of Pakistan. And the best way to reach those naysayers, you know, as you know, we have learned during the course of implementation of polio vaccination drives is to have, you know, locally appropriate, you know, tailoring locally appropriate communication and social mobilization strategies. So a person who is a naysayer, who would he listen to, or who would she listen to? You know, the mother, the grandmother, the father, the grandfather. He or she would listen to someone who belongs to local area and can positively influence, you know, that person. It can be a religious leader, it can be a, you know, a local community leader, it can be a, you know, an influential neighbor. So that's how the program is approaching. And I would like to I would say proudly report here that, you know, the recent reports that I saw during the course of technical advisory group meeting for Afghanistan, that there is a province named Kandahar, and most of you must have heard that's, you know, the sort of polio epicenter historically in Afghanistan, especially South Afghanistan. So the rate of refusal, you know, or the missed children due to refusals has gone down from 5% in January 2020 to almost 2.5% in January 2021. And that's by virtue of two critical steps that the program has taken there. One, engaging more females as polio health workers in those areas. And those females come from the local communities. They have effective access inside the house. They can talk to the mothers, they can talk to the grandmothers, and have direct access to the children, even the youngest one in the lab. That is one. And the second is further fine-tuning and refinement of the communication strategy and community mobilization strategies. So these kind of tactics are useful, and I think we are on a road where we have to just continue our efforts and do not be bogged down or let down if, you know, in certain areas refusals are persisting, and the success will come ultimately, hopefully.
Thank you, Zubair. Verity Swan has asked a question about how can Rotary Clubs most usefully engage in the fight against vaccine-derived polio. And just one thing I'd like to say before that, in relation to what you've said about the importance of community and family in messaging, you know, we mustn't forget that here in Great Britain and Ireland, and our other listeners this evening across the globe, you know, many people will know family or know people that come from areas in Afghanistan or Pakistan. And the messaging that we do at home is also really important, and don't forget that. But sorry, going back to Verity's question to you, Zubair, how can Rotary Clubs most usefully engage in the fight against the vaccine-derived polio?
I think the fight against vaccine-derived polio is exactly the same as the fight against wild polio. So I think we should, first of all, just remind ourselves that somehow, with the help of an assistance of Rotarians, we have got Africa as wild polio free now. And it's the same African region, you know, that is now facing widespread vaccine-derived poliovirus outbreaks as well. So I think from the Rotarians' perspective, the first thing is to, as I said, we should not be let down by these outbreaks, and we should not be disappointed. We have not now got a very good, strong, effective tool. And I think it would be very important to maintain, let's say, support to maintain resources for implementing polio drives in those areas where the vaccine-derived poliovirus outbreaks are occurring. And I mean, resources means, maintaining financial sources, that's one. And the second is, of course, from the Rotarian side, the ongoing advocacy has been extremely helpful at all levels, ranging from the global levels, and then, messages up from the national level Rotarians in all those countries, and even subnational level Rotarians. The voice of Rotarians has, in my experience, and I'm sure in everybody's experience, the voice of Rotarians for the sake of advocacy has been among the most effective one, even up to the implementation level, and not just high level and political level. So I would say, to summarize, is that the support that the Rotarians are providing in terms of a financial report and resource support, that needs to maintain and continue until we finish our job. And the second thing is advocacy and communication, not just at the global level, but also at the national level and implementation level. That effective voice of Rotarians has to continue, and has to continue voicing, the importance of this outbreak response, and reminding everyone about the goal of zero polio that we are eyeing now over the coming months to years.
Thank you, Zubair. And we have got World Immunization Week coming up between the 24th and the 30th of April. And if you haven't already had the information, you will be getting information through from Judith Diamond in relation to a letter that she's asking Rotarians and clubs to be sending to their local politicians. And that advocacy is something that you could be involved in throughout the year in whatever polio activities you're doing in your community. Involve them, let them see that their constituents really care about it. Because at the end of the day, all of this takes money, and every penny that we raise is really important. And every penny that we do not raise is perhaps even more important. So we do have that 50 million goal, so please do it. For World Immunisation Week, there will be some information coming out from Rotary Great Britain and Ireland next week, with some draft social media posts for you, some photographs, and also a short paragraph, 2 or 3 sentences, that we're asking as many Rotarians as possible in Great Britain and Ireland, and anywhere else, of course, you're all welcome, to be posting particularly about COVID and polio and the importance of immunisations. And wouldn't it be wonderful if every single Rotarian posted a short video on social media about that support? But I move back to the questions. Keith, I'm conscious we haven't got to you, and I have still got quite a few questions here. Several of the questions still here are actually answered in the slides, so I'll pass on those. A couple of key ones I do want to cover, though. Zubair, are you still confident the disease can be eradicated, and how will we cope with another flare-up?
Well, that exactly is the question I had my eye on, and I really wanted to come to this. I think we should all be very confident. I am very confident, and I'm sure all of us here on the call and beyond this call are very confident. We should be very confident that, the job is doable, manageable, and now we have, as I said, an effective tool on hand as far as outbreaks of circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses is concerned. And let me also look at it from a different lens, that if we just let the rope slip at this moment, it's not going to be just a few polio cases that we are going to see. Time has told us in several ways, this infectious disease that has taken the form of a pandemic, the COVID-19, we have seen how quickly communicable infectious diseases can spread from not just country to country, but from continent to continent, from one corner to the other corner of the world. And that was the kind of scare we had in 50s for polio. At this moment, if we do not just push and make all efforts to get the job done, we can, God forbid, go to the times when we would again, can possibly have polio cases in, God forbid, European continent or other places in the world. So on one hand, I would say, yes, very confident that this is something that is achievable. We have done that together, and the last mile that we are trying to cover is definitely it's possible to cover. And if we do not do that, or if we let the rope slip, as I said, it will have serious consequences. So let's join hands and let's keep reminding ourselves, and let's keep reminding each other that yes, this is doable, and we are going to get there and cross the finish line, hopefully soon.
Thank you, Zubair. Keith, is there one of the questions that you've had from chat that you particularly like to put to Zubair?
He's answered some of them anyway, and I've got a longish one, but it is about COVID as much as it is about polio. I mean, it's from Saeed, my friend Saeed, and as he said, the CVDVP is a potential unwanted effect of OPV vaccine, and we know that the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the risk. He wants to ask Zubair, with his WHO hat on, what's his opinion of the bad publicity around the AstraZeneca Covid vaccine? And basically, it's a question about the media, and Eve has also asked a question about the media. She suggested that journalists should be given an education, which made me laugh. And I actually, I said that I didn't think that was possible. But I mean, obviously, Zubair, you have to deal with a lot of the way that things are, shall we say, reported in the press, and maybe you could comment on that. I mean, as a professional, you and I both probably despair of most of what we read. But there you are.
Well, I think the vaccines that are currently in use, for COVID, are being used, with the approval of, the regulatory authorities of a given country. And but the point that I would like to emphasize here, that and that we have heard it, so many times over the last 1 year, is that we are still discovering about the way COVID, SARS-CoV-2 behaves. And I'm sure we will discover more and more, in terms of the outcome of the vaccines that are currently in use. We are not yet sure. We are not aware if these vaccines would provide a lifelong immunity or a short-term immunity or an intermediate-term immunity. But what I know is that all the vaccines that are currently being used, they are effective against not letting the COVID-19 progress to the critical phase and reduce mortality. I think these are two extremely important things. And lastly, connecting it to polio, I would say that in 1950s and 60s, we were for polio vaccine in a phase that we are in now for COVID.
Yeah.
And now that we have discovered so much about polio vaccine, we have established scientifically evidenced safe vaccine, efficacious vaccine, and we have reached a point where using oral polio vaccine should have no doubts in anybody's minds. And yet we are still struggling in certain places. So what I would say is that concentrate on polio eradication and make sure that now that we have such effective tools against polio in the form of such effective vaccines, we should have this menace and this disease thrown out of the planet as soon as possible. And hopefully during the coming months, we'll make better progress and further progress on COVID as well.
Yeah, can I put a supplementary, which came from, I've been having a conversation with Emma, my compatriot in Belgium, and she did ask a question about what happened in Hispaniola, and she says, how long does the virus survive in the environment? Which, not a long time, but I mean, maybe you could answer that one, Zubair.
Well, the virus, the poliovirus, whether vaccine-derived poliovirus or wild poliovirus, as you said, it does not survive in the environment for too long. And I think that's, every disease is not eradicable. That's why polio is eradicable disease.
Yes.
TB is not eradicable for that matter. Why is polio eradicable? One is that human body is the only, reservoir for poliovirus. It does not replicate outside the human body in the environment, nor in any other living being or in any animal. So in the environment, it's as low as a few hours, or it can be up to 72 hours. In very, very favorable conditions, it can be slightly longer. But if the guts of the community and people living in a geographical area are immune by oral polio vaccine, the virus would not find a place or refuge to live and to replicate itself, and hence it would die out. And that's the science, and that's the basis for polio eradication.
Thank you, Zubair. I'm conscious that we're heading towards 8 o'clock, and I do want to give Zubair an opportunity to just do 2 minutes on any last message that he wants to give us. So I'm just going to do the housekeeping aspects of it quickly first. First of all, big thanks to Zubair and to Keith as well for your help. The recording will be available on the YouTube channel for Great Britain and Ireland at some point in the next few days, or certainly early next week. I will be sending all those that registered a copy or a PDF copy of the slides. The date for your diaries for our next session is the 17th of May, Monday the 17th of May. Dr Hamid Jafari from focusing on Afghanistan and Pakistan. So again, pre-register for that. Details will be coming out shortly for that. The registration is now done through the Rotary Great Britain and Ireland Eventbrite system. So please make sure that you do register for that. And don't forget World Immunization Week. We can all really make a difference with that. And all of the polio campaign needs money. And as I said before, although I said it as a penny, but every pound we raise is worth 3, as we all know so well. But every pound we do not raise loses us £3. So please, please, please keep up the efforts to raise the money. Keep up your advocacy efforts and share with us your success stories, because we can all learn from them and we can all cheer ourselves up when there's a bad day. So Zubair, I'd like to give you the last couple of minutes, please.
Thanks a lot, Jenny. In fact, you have made my job rather easy, by saying those wonderful words. But what I would like to say here is, again, mention that Rotarians, all those forums ranging from the global level up to the implementation level inside the countries, Rotarians, I would say, keep the game going. And they do not let the despair come in, even during the situations where there are serious challenges and several kinds of challenges. At this juncture of the program, I think we are not just facing challenges like inaccessibility in Afghanistan, some naysayers and refusals to vaccination, but also I think reaching those last set of children in the most difficult places of the world would need the highest amount of commitment and efforts. And that is just not possible without the help and assistance and the drive from Rotarians, which means we maintain the funding support to the polio program in this last extremely important juncture. And on one hand, that Janine has mentioned that every penny raised is important, every penny not raised is even more important. I would like to assure you here that every penny raised and passed on to the polio program is trying to make sure that penny is utilized to the maximum possible potential in the most optimal way, and it counts in the best possible way to reach those last few children and the last children that we are struggling to reach and vaccinate. I would really request also to use all your potentials to maintain the political level advocacy, to maintain all your efforts and use all your tentacles for raising awareness among the communities by any means that you have handle on. That's extremely, extremely critical and helpful, and Rotarians have been remarkable, and we we're requesting just that, this zeal and enthusiasm has to go on until we cross the finish line. And very lastly, I would like to again tell you that I'm personally extremely enthralled by the introduction of novel OPV2. And in relation to today's topic on circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus outbreaks that have really been striking our back for the last 3 to 4 years. Now we have a very strong tool to strike back and stop those outbreaks. But your support in terms of maintaining financial support and the other means that I've just mentioned, it's going to be extremely critical, because novel OPV2 has to be delivered to the mouth of those children that we are striving to reach, and that would need means to reach those children and offer this vaccine. So I would like to salute in the end again all the Rotarians, and thank you very much for all the support that you've been providing. And I would thank Janine also to allow me these on and off regular chances to interact and have my rush of blood again going, and have my energy refreshed. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Zubair. You are a star. Your passion, the time that you take in your work and doing extra things like this for us as well. Thank you so, so much. We all have to work together to get to that end goal of a polio-free world for the future, forever. And we can only do that by working together. So thanks to all of you that have attended this evening. And please keep up those efforts, and please share your passion with other people and get them to watch the recordings on YouTube of not just this session. We've had some amazing sessions already. Last time was about Polio Plus and the incredible things that Polio Programme is delivering for our world beyond Polio Programme. So over to you all now to go home, the safe journey home. Have a good evening, a good morning, or whatever time it is where you are. Thanks for everything you are doing, and let's really get our noise out there for World Immunisation Week. Use it to raise the profile of Rotary's polio campaign and Rotary's work in the COVID response and the vaccine rollout. Thanks again, and bye everybody. You can all go now.